Yo, it's Internet. What's going on with y'all? My buddy DJ suggested I read The Way of Kings because he's an asshole. No, not seriously. He really enjoys the series and thought that I would too. But it's worth mentioning that the first audiobook, which is also the shortest, is a whopping 45 fucking hours to get through. So let's just acknowledge ahead of time that this review will be massively pared down because I'm not doing another half-hour video. I hated the process of Midnight Sun. So we start off being introduced to Szeth, who is some sort of magic-wielding assassin. This is one of those drop you off in the middle and hope you catch up kind of approaches to world building, which I find I'm never really a fan of. But this is a monster-sized book, so maybe there will be time to understand. As it turns out, Szeth isn't even actually our real central character. Now, weirdly, I'm like 6 points past the point when I wrote the last sentence, and while I understand certain things much better, I still barely grasp the concept of this. But here's a basic rundown of what I've got so far. The book jumps between two people early on, Kaladin, an ex-army sergeant who was betrayed by the higher-ups and sold as a slave, and eventually winds up serving as a bridgeman for his old army. His whole arc is about finding the will to fight for those around him again, as he considers himself to be cursed to help those he tries to help, often citing his old army crew, who were deaded in a really cool spoiler-heavy scene. The second is a woman named Cheyenne, who is desperately trying to save her failing house by becoming a ward of a woman she intends to rob. While there is a ton of stuff that comes along with all these lines of story themselves, they aren't uninteresting or uncompelling, but I really think that a streamlined approach would have helped it seem less like a brick wall to get into this book. Still, once you do get through that brick wall, there's a lot of good to be had. The world here is extremely deep, even if it's not especially immersive, and clearly the author thought out a ton of factors within the different countries and factions and currencies. That being said, there's a shit ton of mentions of the different races and cultures that I would strongly advise not trying to follow, just because there's more than enough to tackle here already. Like, look, don't hike up a mountain the same day they eat pancakes from the griddle. Some things are just not meant for the human brain or body to compensate for. That being said, what parts of the story I am grasping are pretty good. Both main characters are fairly interesting and sympathetic to a degree, even if you don't always agree with their decisions. As we move into part 2, we weirdly drop the girls plot and follow Kaladin, as well as a father and son who fight in the same army that Kaladin is now a bridgeman in. Honestly, this is a part of the story where Kaladin shines as he finds the strength and will to take control of the men that are a part of his unit and fights to save their lives and show them that even as slaves, their lives can still have some meaning. It's really touching and makes you want to root for him through this impossible task. There's also a really cool reveal on his part that I won't spoil, but it did help me realize why the part of the prologue was actually really important here. So, as time presses on, we get introduced to a few new characters, Galavar and his son, whose name I forget. Galavar is the brother of the king who Szeth deaded in the prologue, and Galavar is trying to help out the kingdom in its war as an honest man in a sea of liars and cheats, sort of like Ned Stark in Game of Thrones. Anyway, for as mammoth-sized as this book is, it's hard to actually talk about it without spoiling a lot of really cool stuff that's best experienced firsthand. Suffice to say, it usually gives you just enough information to put the answers together yourself before it confirms or breaks your theory, which is good, and it helps the reader feel clever without being too easy or condescending a tone. While I'm not super crazy about some of the choices made in the introductions, or about how the interludes hop between characters that we almost never see, none of it is exactly unimportant, and it can help enhance our understanding of what's going on. While there is a monster mammoth-sized task in understanding who the fuck is who, and why people are, and why we should care, it is super satisfying when all those weird threads do start connecting and form coherent stories. For example, Kaladin, as a bridgeman, has to help his army carry heavy bridges and help the armies across these huge fissures in the earth while trying to keep his old crew from being cannon fire from the opposing archers. This eventually helps him cross paths with the leader of his camp, who is one of the leaders alongside Dalinar and his son. And the two have a lot of back and forth, therefore we can see this other leader from Kaladin's side of things, and we have a much greater understanding of who he is and why we don't like him. Anyway, I won't spoil the ending again because it's something that should really be experienced firsthand, and this is one of those cats that can't be put back in the bag once it's been taken out. However, the end point I'll say here is that I rather ended up enjoying the book far more than I expected that I would, and it has a lot of neat ideas that make it really worth the trouble of breaking into it, even though I would say that you were totally justifying in feeling that it might not be worth the effort. My personal score is 8.5 out of 10. It's not perfect. There's a lot of waffle at the beginning, and I honestly feel that the story would have been better with a bit of trimming alongside, along with a much clearer idea of matters at the start. But past all that, it's a pretty damn good book, and I hope that I get a chance to check out the rest of the series. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at that bingo card. And we filled out a ton of the bingo card, although that's not especially surprising. If a room full of monkeys will eventually write Shakespeare on a typewriter, a tome of an epic should probably hit most of the bingo cards sooner or later. Still, we only managed to complete rows thrice, and that's worthy of some note. Anyway, that's all for this time, so if you have something else you want me to review, go ahead and leave a comment down below, let me know. Until next time, drink plenty of water, tell your parents that you love them, and stroke your mustache at night.